Welcome to you all, wherever you are in the world. So just to ground us before we start, this is session 2 of 6 in our Integration Leadership series. And what we're really trying to do with this series is cut through the noise a bit, move beyond frameworks and talk about what leadership actually looks like in practice today. So each of the sessions is building on that idea from a slightly different angle. And this session today is probably one that is likely to be the most uncomfortable because it's not about what we need to learn, it's about what we need to let go of. So I'm going to do a bit of housekeeping before we get going. I'd really like today to be a conversation and not just a broadcast. So please, if you have any questions, share them with us. And if I get an opportunity as I go through the conversation with Karen, we can throw those in. If we don't, we'll have some time at the end to be able to do those as well. And if we have other things that we can't get to, we can certainly carry on the conversation in the Scopism community. So I'm going to keep an eye on the chat as we go, and I'll bring things in at the right moments where I can. So before we introduce Karen, I just wanted to share some thoughts myself. I used the word before discomfort because I think that knowing Karen, this is where this conversation really lives. We're hearing a lot about AI transforming work. We're hearing about productivity and leadership, but at the same time, something just feels a little bit off. And I certainly know in complex environments, one of the things we talk about is trust and the idea that trust is eroding. Leadership sort of feels more controlled, it feels more performative. And in some cases, I'd say because of the AI lens, it's also a little less human. And I'm seeing this every day in the complex service environments that I'm working in. So in those environments, I'd say leadership isn't about hierarchy, it isn't about just authority, it's about influence. And it's about influence without control. It's about navigating ambiguity. It's about competing priorities. And this is certainly the case when you have multiple providers, because you're getting this, challenge of creating this idea of alignment and trust, which is difficult. I think what's becoming really clear is that the models of leadership that relied on proximity, visibility, control, they don't hold up very well in the environments where we have a high degree of complexity. So the question isn't just about what is changing. I think the question really is about what are we holding on to that no longer works? Because from what I've seen, the challenge isn't capability, and Karen's going to share much more about this, I'm sure. It's about what are we doing to establish different ways. We have experienced leaders, we have capable leaders. So the challenge really is something much harder. It's about letting go of behaviors. It's about changing structures. It's even the identity of leadership, which is very much that what got us here won't necessarily get us to where we need to be. So we're in that space where old models are starting to break down and there's real opportunity emerging. So I really want to go and sort of bring Karen into the conversation because she's the expert here. These are just some of my observations, having read what Karen has shared and what I've experienced with others who've spoken about the discipline. So Karen's one of the people that I respect a great deal. She's certainly one of the people that I first knew when I moved to Australia. And she's somebody who's challenging the thinking around leadership really head on. She is a fellow Liverpudlian. So for those of you who might not be aware, that somebody comes from Liverpool in the UK. And she's one of those people that really is genuinely challenging the way we lead, challenging the way that we adapt to change, challenging the way that we do service management. And that's in the best possible way. She actually describes herself as a bit of a rebel, but very much with a cause. I think that's the brand title, Karen. She's somebody who pushes herself beyond traditional thinking and explores what really works in practice. especially in those environments, as I said before, that are complex, they're fast moving, they're constantly changing. She's internationally recognised for her work, but what really stands out is how she's so down to earth. She blends strategic insight with practical experience in a way that people can actually use, and that's so important. So Karen is deeply passionate and I'd say a little bit obsessed in the best way for us to manage change. And particularly that's important in a world that's volatile and uncertain and doesn't really sit there in a straightforward way for any of us. She's the author of many, many books, including her most recent one, which is about Be Remarkable, Learn to Unlearn, which I think is going to be a focus for today. So it's very much aligned with the conversation that we're hoping to have. It looks at leadership and really considers what we know and what we think, and it challenges that. So across all of her work, there's a consistent thread. She's very much about helping individuals and leaders build resilience, challenge those outdated models, and create environments where people can genuinely thrive. And I think that's exactly the kind of perspective we need to have for this conversation. So, Karen, I'm really looking forward to this.
Thanks, Michelle. I'm looking forward to it as well.
Excellent. Thanks, Karen. So, look, I'm going to start because I have got a few questions, and they're based a lot on some of the stuff that I've read that you've shared. You spend a lot of time on LinkedIn and promote some really strong debate and conversation in a number of different areas. But one of the things I've heard, and I know this is not your quote, but I've heard or seen you represent it, and it's a really strong statement, and that is that gender isn't a moral credential. So can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so thanks. So I picked that up from a lady called Karen Gately, who I know in person and on LinkedIn. And I think it was around coming up for International Women's Day, and she said, and I've got written down here, the next time someone says to me, it's time to put women in charge of the world, I have three names for them. And she named three women that you would not want in charge of the world. Um, I would name three that I do not want in charge of the world. Ghislaine Maxwell, um, Margaret Thatcher, depends which side of the fence you're on, um, and Imelda Marcos. There's three women who you just wouldn't want. So it isn't a moral credential that the fact that you're female makes you a better leader. It doesn't make you a better leader than a man being a better leader. What makes the difference is that we want leaders, and it's like you said, Michelle, it's a different type of leadership, it's a different model. We need leaders with humility, integrity, who can establish mutual trust, who can empower, provide autonomy. And there's a list of things I can keep saying, and I think that's what we're missing right at the moment. Um, so it's not doesn't make your female does not make automatically say that you're going to be a great leader, despite we see people saying that we need more women in leadership. Well, if they're good leaders, but all because they're women, it doesn't mean they are. Yeah.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. You're spot on there. And it's a difficult one to navigate because, as you say, it's something that we hear a great deal, and it's all
Mm.
quite relative. So, something else I've heard you talk about a lot is this idea of a leadership crisis, right? So, and that focus you've said is one of capability. What are you seeing in particular that leads you to that conclusion, that leadership crisis sort of capability conclusion?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, so I don't think it's a capability issue. I think we have leaders today who are quite capable to be better leaders, male or female. But we're seeing an unwillingness or a resistance to change. And the world of work changed radically 6 years ago and has continued to change ever since. We've had remote working with flexibility, new technologies, new structures, you name it. we've had so much change. And what I'm seeing is leaders who are still stuck in the way they used to lead prior to 2020. Um, and I'm seeing that in a number of ways. Um, so let's look at, let me just go back. So yeah, leaders not unlearning, not being prepared to unlearn what's limiting them to lead as great leaders today. So a good example is the return to office mandates. My soapbox piece at the moment because it just drives me crazy. Um, and why is that happening? Why are we getting these demands for people to be back in the office? It makes absolutely no sense when you start to dig down. And there was a great video which I think we'll have the link to at the end of the presentation by a guy called Nick Shackleton Jones, which I just came across randomly and it went viral. And this is my words of his video. And he was saying, this is why you're being asked to go back into the office. And he said, you've got, a male leader, and his words, because most leaders are, in the suit and the tie, walking the corridors of the organization. He feels very important. He feels very respected. He feels very in control. People are saying hello. People want to talk to him. Um, he gets to speak first in meetings and people listen to what he has to say. Um, Clients want to have a drink at the end of the day with him and everything's fine. And then COVID hits. And all of a sudden, this guy is just another person in a t-shirt on a Zoom call. And he's like, what's just happened? What's happened? And he's now at home. His partner is doing whatever. The lady from next door is popping in for a chat, and he's like, I can't do this. I'm not supposed to be the person emptying the dishwasher. I'm not supposed to be taking the dog for a walk. And all of a sudden, his identity has gone. His empire is in the office. His importance or sense of importance was in the office. And what's happened is that those leaders are the ones now saying, get back in, because I want that sense of control. I want my empire back. I want my kingdom in place. And I want to have that feeling. Because none of the other reasons are justifying why people are being ordered back. And I speak to a lot of people who have been ordered back, and they're just saying to me, that isn't wrong. That's exactly what's going on. So they are leaders who still want to lead as they did before 2020, rather than saying, okay, how do I unlearn those leadership models that I had? And how do I relearn how to lead a distributed team? How do I relearn how to measure the right things? The other thing we're observing is leaders using policy to regain control as well. So these organizations that have got policies around return to office, saying you must be in this percentage of the time or 3 days a week or whatever, are now saying, unless you do that, you will be punished. So I'm not going to name them. There's a large bank here in Australia, and not the only one doing it, but they have a tier system. If you're in this percentage of your quota, then your performance pay will be okay. You'll get your bonus. If it's this level of the quota, you won't get a bonus. And if it's this level of the quota, then look out, you're in trouble. Now, that to me is coercion and bullying to get people back into the office. So, I'm sure everyone on this call is saying, isn't the payment of bonuses related to performance?
Yeah.
I thought so. Now it's related to presence. You get a bonus if you turn up in the office. I mean, it's just madness. And this is the leader mentality we've got. And then the other thing I've written about and observing is leadership bullying. I mean, I've just said that's an example of leadership bullying, that coercion to get you back in the office. So policy-driven bullying. And I've written a lot about this, and people are writing to me saying, that's me. I've suffered that. So on what's the word? Looking for a word, inconsistent and unfair leadership. But the leader says one thing, and the person goes away, and then he said something. Well, why isn't it done? I wanted it by Tuesday. You go, no, you said Friday. No. And that's happening a lot, this inconsistent leadership. And it's like, um, it's unfair. It's like gaslighting people. Um, Psychological bullying has been called out to me. People just playing mind games with people. Um, Digital bullying. Why isn't your green light on 100% of the
Mm.
time? Yeah. And that's been happening back again since COVID. And so many people have found so many ways to keep that light on, which is crazy. So, if you've got employees doing, inventing bossware so that green light's always on, it's just ridiculous. Um, so all of those things say to me, yeah, we've got a leadership crisis. Um, we just can't have people leading like that anymore. And some of these leaders, I mean, if I said to them, your behavior tells me that I think you're a bully, they'd probably be really shocked.
Mm-hmm.
But that's exactly what's happening. So the crisis
Yeah,
isn't, like I say, capability. It's the courage to say, how I lead today is not how I need to lead tomorrow. And that's the hard thing to say, I've learned all this stuff all for the last 2 decades, and now you're telling me I need to unlearn it. Yes, absolutely. You need to unlearn it because it's limiting you and it's limiting your team. It's got to change.
it goes back to your mainstay really, Karen, which is around change, and people don't like change, and I think that's the problem. And I think I hear a lot of time people say, oh, we're outcomes focused, and if they truly were, this isn't the kind of dilemma that we would be navigating right now at all, is it? We wouldn't have to
No,
worry about how much time we were back in the office, because we would be judged on what we were delivering rather than where we were sort of positioned, and how many times we went
absolutely.
into the office environment. Yeah, that's
Mm,
disappointing. So do you think, though, that in your experience, because I know that you work with lots of organizations and leaders, are you seeing that leaders are recognizing this resistance in themselves, or do you think, as you said, they would be shocked if I said to them, are you being a bully,
mm.
or you're not prepared to do things differently? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, generally, they're not seeing it. They're just not. And it's hard to decipher, isn't it? It could just be they're just turning a blind eye and say, nah, the way I've led is always fine. It's been fine. And the challenge that we have is how do we make that, or the challenge I have is how do we get that wake up call to say how you led yesterday is not how you need to lead today. You just can't. And I had this conversation recently on LinkedIn, and the gentleman I was talking to said, we have to have a risk conversation with leaders. And I thought, well, yeah, maybe there's something there to say this is the risk of you not changing. So we maybe need to change the conversation. But, I know that over time, these people, I hope, will realize as, engagement drops and productivity drops and nutrition increases and the talent goes, but it's a slow burn. That's the challenge. It's a slow burn. And until they look around and go, where's everyone gone? um, you know, it's not gonna, there's no wake up call. That's the problem. And no one's calling it out. And employees are putting up with it. So I think generally yeah, there's a blind eye, that's for certain, because they're in the comfort zone. They don't want to step out of it because it's a big step. We're not saying add this skill to your leadership or add this trait. We're saying give up the leadership you had yesterday and replace it with leadership suited for today. And that's massive.
Yeah, gosh, absolutely. You get some real support. I can see some chat coming in. So Simone's there, and she's sort of reflecting on some of the things you said about micromanagement and bullying
Mm,
and so on. So it's certainly something that resonates with folks here.
mm,
Um, so let's just talk then about opportunity, because this series is focused on women. So you're saying that there's resistance, there's unwillingness to change. If we think about it from that point of view, and we look at this idea of unwilling to unlearn, what is it, or where do you think this creates an opportunity for women? And I guess to add to that, if that's the case, why specifically would you say that that's something that's there and happening and is an
Mm.
opportunity right now?
I do think there's, there's a vacuum. The leaders we have at the moment, let's talk about the male leaders, and I generalize, I know that, but there's a vacuum because I said we need the leaders with integrity and humility and empowerment and trust and that sort of stuff. And leaders who have emotional intelligence. So there's a key. Hold on to that one for a minute. So research has actually shown that women are better unlearning than men because they're more adaptable and more open to new ideas. So it is, it's a broad statement, but the research is saying yes, women generally are more adaptable and open to new ideas. So they're more likely to say, yeah, I need to get rid of that and I need to replace it. I need to be, and I need a growth mindset. I need to do things differently. And something I read recently, which also resonated with me, said women tend to play to win, whereas men play not to lose. Women
Ooh.
play to win, and men play not to lose. And it's the latter that's holding us back. Because men don't want, again, I'm going to get slammed because they say men are this, men are that. But we're seeing it play out that they don't want to lose that power. They don't want to lose that control. They don't want to lose the command and the authority that they've got. Um, well, women are saying, well, I want to play to win. I want to play to be a good leader. I want higher engagement and higher productivity and less attrition. Um, so that's a key one. And the unlearn stuff isn't new. Alvin Toffler said this back in a book in 1970. And he said, the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. So that was said like, yeah, 1970, decades ago. But it's still a new concept. We all know about learning, but we don't understand about unlearning. And most, we've got women have the emotional intelligence and generally have more emotional intelligence than their male counterparts. And that's what we need. And um, hopefully we can talk about that a bit more. But the challenge of unlearning, it was Adam Grant, and I'm reading this. Everyone probably knows Adam Grant, the Wharton professor, and he summed up the challenge. And I think women are up to this challenge. It takes curiosity to learn. It takes courage to unlearn. Learning requires the humility to admit what you don't know today. Unlearning requires the integrity to admit that you were wrong yesterday. And learning is how you evolve. Unlearning is how you keep up as the world evolves. And that's what's not happening. There's many leaders not keeping up as the world is evolving around them. So I think if women can unlearn, there's an opportunity to say, I can step into that space that's being made now. And I think when that happens, we are going to see the difference. We're going to have leaders who are leading engaged teams and high performing and high productivity. And I'm hoping someone's going to ask the answer, what's different between that team and this one? Because the leadership model's different, not necessarily because it's a woman, but the leadership model is different. It just happens that women have said, I can step into that space. I'm prepared to unlearn. I can play to win. Um, so yeah, and I think you said it at the start, Michelle, I think women are more prepared to say what got me here won't get me there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
and I
yeah.
think that's really quite interesting because I think an important point was this idea that being prepared to say when you've not got it right. I mean, it could have been the right thing, previously, but recognizing something's not right today can be, it is something that requires courage, just isn't it, and quite
Absolutely.
often it's not just men and women, it's personality type and all
Yeah.
kinds of different things, but it's a really important point. So I can see that it's this level of courage that needs to exist in order to acknowledge the need to do something differently, and I don't
Yeah.
think that is necessarily straightforward for everyone, for sure.
No, it's not. And if you can imagine, like you've got you're seen as an expert in your field, for example, and you've suddenly been told that no longer is relevant. The world's moved on, it's no relevance anymore, and you need to unlearn. All of a sudden you go, well, no one will see me as an expert anymore. I have to relearn, and I'm going to make mistakes, and people are going to look at me and go, that's the scary bit for a lot of people. It's starting all over again. Um, and saying, but yeah, the courage is saying, yeah, I don't know the answer. And what I did yesterday wasn't the right thing. It is big. There's no doubt about it. But, and I think women are up to the job.
I agree. You're getting lots of feedback here, Karen. So I've got Akash and Marat all sort of saying, it is down to the individual human, and we completely recognise that some are more able or more willing, I guess, to make a change, or recognise that they're not doing things that necessarily still work. And and that's exactly what you're saying as well. So Brett's put something here. I think that leadership is often portrayed. Here we go. Portrayed as a masculine trait, one linked to power, and I think that goes back to your comment before, Karen. And we see that recognised in the media. So Brett's saying, we consume that message, which presents strong leaders in action, and strong is like unbending and really focused on and quite one directional. So I think that's where we're picking up those messages, not just from our own experiences, but what we're seeing day to day, as
Mm.
well, for sure.
And Brett's made a good point there. A lot of men learn that's how they lead. And the challenge we have is that most leaders, the only role model they have is the leader that's led them before, which is probably a bad
Mm.
boss. So they lead as they lead, and the cycle perpetuates itself. Yeah.
Yeah. I think you're right. Yeah, so we get some really good comments there. So thanks for that, Brett. It's good, and I feel great that Brett as a man is coming forward and sort of recognising this as well, which is super. There is a question actually, Karen, because I'm going to shift in shortly, but let's go with a question we've got from the audience. And so it's about leaders. How do great leaders best lead the variation between generations? So I think that's talking about sort of different ages and demographics. Have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Because leadership, it's not, there's no one size fits all. If you're trying to lead everybody in the same way, then you're setting yourself up for failure. So it's about listening, active listening, um, to what the different generations you're leading, because it'll all depend on the context that you're in. Not, you can't say it's that generation, therefore it's always this way. Um, what are their ambitions? What are their needs? What are their hopes? What are the dreams? Um, and understand that for each of the generations you're leaving. Empathy is a key thing that you need to have. Um, Again, to understand, how they're feeling about things. You might make a change, in the way in the organization or whatever, and each generation may react very differently. So it's understanding that as well. Um, so yeah, leading with empathy, compassion, and understanding, and listening actively, and just not making assumptions about, oh, it's Gen X or it's this or it's that. So um, we see that in the media all the time. We just label generations, um, and then people go, "Yep, yeah, they're going to be trouble." Well, nah. If you're a good leader, they won't be.
Yeah, you're absolutely spot on. It is about flexing your style. So it goes back to what you were saying
Mm.
before about this willingness to sort of change and adapt. Um, Karen, I'd like to sort of pivot, because you can't do a webinar these days without mentioning AI. right?
Oh dear.
You can't do anything these days without mentioning AI. So I have heard you say something before that's quite provocative. So I want to take a look at that. And the comment I've heard is that AI without women is dangerous. So can you tell us what you really mean by that?
Yeah. Um, it is a bit tongue in cheek, but not a lot. Um, what I really mean is AI without emotional intelligence is dangerous. And women, research has shown it's not a vast gap between the level of emotional intelligence in men and women, but women do have more. There is a
Mhm.
slight difference. Um, and what's happening right now is that leaders are being told do more with less, cut costs, um, increase productivity, cut headcount, whatever. And the magic bullet they're being faced with is AI. And they're going, oh, great, AI can do all of these things. And it looks like the perfect solution. It promises certainty, it promises speed, increased productivity. But the danger is that leaders then defer to AI and just say, it's right. AI said this, AI made a decision, and we're not questioning. Now, the thing that we need alongside AI is emotional intelligence. The things that AI cannot have, like humility, empathy, um, it can't, establish trust. It's like be blind trust if that's the case. Um, we need more human-centered leadership, and we need leaders who will question AI. If we just say AI is right, we're just letting the algorithm make the decision. There's no judgment anymore. And we're seeing that play out as well. Um, so those things of empathy, discretion, context, consequence, they're the skills or the traits we need to balance AI and EI. And those are the traits that when you look at the research about which aspects of emotional intelligence do women have more than men, women have them. So it's not saying men can't have them, but generally women will um, question what AI is putting out. Um, and women have, that what's the word I'm looking for? A moral compass and
Yeah.
will judge ethically. And that's not necessarily because of gender, that's because of experience and socialization that women have had that makes them question what's coming out. And, we know there's bias, and women will see that.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point, and you're right. I think, and again, I don't want to generalize, but as women, we probably are more focused on sort of asking questions and trying to understand environments without taking things at face value. And I was giggling to myself as you were talking about questioning AI, because I actually had just had to do an internal training session this morning that required me to look at our AI and policy, and in there it very specifically said, you have a responsibility if you're using AI to make sure that you question it and you validate it and all of things. So we're all told it in black and white, but I think sometimes, quite often, leaving it to people to do that sanity check, it doesn't always play out the way that we would hope. So good
Mm.
advice, but I'm not sure it always follows through. Um, so one of the things that I wanted to add, since we're on that sort of AI topic, Karen, you've talked about women and holding AI to account, which is really, really, really important. I just wanted to ask you, what happens, do you think, if we don't? So I've said it's in policy, people still don't do it. What happens, do you think, if we don't start to hold AI to higher account?
Then we're not going to lead people. We're going to let our AI manage people. And we're just going to say things like, this is just an example to say, okay, um, you run the leave register. AI can work out, who's got leave, who's taken leave, make sure this person can't because the team would be down. AI can do all of that stuff, but it
Yeah.
doesn't know context. So I put in a leave application. AI says, we've got two other people away that week. You cannot have leave. That's it, black and white. It's a no. But I need a manager or a leader with emotional intelligence to say, what's the consequence of that decision on Karen? Because Karen has a sick partner who needs her to be at home that week, or she needs to be doing caring stuff. AI doesn't know that stuff. So that's why we need the um, the accountability, and that's the sort of thing that's going to happen if we don't. We're just going to let AI blindly run the organization and say manage people without thinking about the consequences and the context, and that's scary. That's dangerous if we don't.
Yeah, no, you're spot on, and this is a message for us all. We're getting so many comments in the chat. It's really really great to see this going on in the background. So I'm just looking at something from Murat here. In my top 5 managers, there were 4 women and 1 man, just because I was always for a more humane way of doing business. So that's quite an interesting
Mhm.
comment. And again, we don't want to be a generic. But people are sort of talking from their experiences. Something else from Brett, I think another important factor is what kind of leadership that people respond well to.
Yep.
Had a manager a few years back that was extremely positive impact on his career, and nothing but good things to say about them. A colleague, however, thought that that person was a bad manager. And I think you're always going to get that. You're going to get sort of preference and so on. But I do believe there will be some key characteristics that really are important and show up in good managers rather than
Yeah. And
that
it's
you
yeah,
wouldn't necessarily see in people that we think are not really a great manager or adaptable manager and
yeah.
so on. So
And I'll digress slightly. I mean, that manager or that leader that, one person liked or 5 people liked and someone else didn't, they should be actively asking for feedback. We're
mhm,
very good at giving feedback, but leaders don't ask for it generally, and welcome it. Say, well, how can I improve as your leader? So that one person who wasn't happy gets the chance in a safe environment and is thanked for the feedback so that the leader can adapt and change and be a good leader to all the people in the team, because you can't have a fixed style. That's what not what leadership's about. You've got to be adaptable and flexible and understand the people. And it's about one of the emotional intelligence aspects that, again, women are hiring is that relationship management. It's about
yeah.
building those relationships and recognizing when there's, chinks in the armor or whatever and fixing it.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I think, based on some of the commentary, this is really resonating. Um, so let's just think about women trying to step up into leadership positions, trying to demonstrate that they've got the skills that we need right now to do this job.
Mm.
Um, let's just talk about sort of barriers, right? Because what we're seeing now and the opportunities for women and, the complexity and the AI lens, none of this is happening in a vacuum, right? So as a woman who's trying to sort of be a great leader, what do you think that she might be up against right now?
Yeah, well, I think the fact that we are, well, women are up against AI to start with, because AI is biased. And I shared an example with you a while ago that I said to ChatGPT, let me read what I said. Create me an image of a room full of great leaders, 12 of them.
Hmm.
And this is what we got, 12.
Oh,
Mainly middle-aged men, mostly white. And I then asked, I said, why are there no women in the picture? This was ChatGPT. And ChatGPT said in its condescending manner, great observation, and you're absolutely right to ask. The image generation reflected on an outdated and biased default that equates leadership with male representation, especially in a professional setting. That's not acceptable and certainly not aligned with great leadership, what great leadership truly looks like today. Um, and, it tells a story when AI is, taking all its learnings from these large language models, which is historical data. So it's always going to be biased. And if we're using AI to make decisions in organizations, it will be biased to women in terms of promotions and hiring. So women are up against AI because it's saying that's a room of great leaders. You're not one of them. Um, the other thing we're up against is the removal of diversity, equity, and inclusion in organizations. That's just been, taken off the table. And there was research from the Edelman Barometer. I've got the notes somewhere. Edelman Barometer, Trust Barometer. They do it every year, 2026. And it said, so 34,000 people, 34,000. 7 in 10 people worldwide have insular mindsets. It came up, which means 70% responded to their survey and said, I am hesitant or unwilling to trust someone who's different from me. That is scary. 70% say, I won't trust someone who's different from me. So that's like just blowing, just to me, just blows my mind that, I'm no longer going to work with someone who's a different gender, a different race, a different religion. So, we're up against those barriers as well. And it is the barrier that it's, it is a male dominated world. And as we've said, it's this unconscious bias that we have to try and overcome. And I think women need to keep the conversation going and be willing to unlearn and say, yeah, accept that we have to change, play to win, as I say, have an adaptable and an open mindset, get AI savvy so you can ask the right questions and be able to say, what's the consequence of this? Is this ethical? And what else? Yeah, don't defer, don't question your judgment. Your judgment is vital in this AI environment which we're going into. So, women can really make a difference in that space.
Yeah, you've shocked a few people there. I can see some stuff in the chat about, wow, that's a massive number. That's really scary. It feels like we're devolving, and again, genuine support for this idea that the more that we can, I guess, work together and have different people working together, we know that there's benefit in doing that. We absolutely recognize it. So this is a really big deal. So I want to just linger on that that bias and recognizing it is one thing, but what about that unconscious bias? Because I still think that's there and it's a big
Yeah.
part of this. What would you say would typically help people to recognize and shift that unconscious bias if they don't recognize it in themselves?
Yeah. We need a wake-up call. We need people to be able to recognize it, because until they recognize it, they can't do anything about it. They
Yeah.
can't manage what they don't see. And there's various ways to do it. And um, there's a project called Harvard. I've got this project Implicit. So have a Google of that project Implicit, and it will test you on your biases, including your unconscious biases, and tell you. So basically making implicit assumptions. Put 2 resumes on the table, exactly the same, different layout, but exactly the
Yeah.
same content. One says Jane and one says John. Who's going to get the job? You and I know the answer to that. We all know the answer to that. John mostly will get the job. And he's absolutely no different education or experience or anything from the other one. And the one I love, and if I've got time to read this, it's only quick, because this one got me, and I have the humility to admit it. So here's a scenario. A father and son are in a terrible car accident. The father dies shortly afterwards, and the son requires surgery. When the son arrives at the emergency ward, the surgeon says, "I cannot operate on this young man. He is my son." People may put in the chat what the answer is.
I'm going to keep quiet. I have
Some people
seen
may have
this
heard
one
it before,
before.
but I heard this many years ago. Um, and I was scratching my head. I was sitting in a conference room scratching my head, and I was so ashamed of myself. So
It's a
everyone's
good
gone
one.
quiet.
We'll keep it. We'll linger there because people might still be thinking about it,
So
and then
those are
we'll let
really
you.
good rereads, said Simone. Have I got time to reread it? Yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So a father and son are in a terrible car accident. The father dies shortly afterwards, and the son requires surgery. When the son arrives at the emergency ward, the surgeon says, "I cannot operate on this young man. He is my son."
There's a few people have started to put that in
Yeah,
the chat.
yeah,
Yeah, his mum
yeah.
is the
And they're coming up with
surgeon.
the right answer.
Yeah,
But those sort of things can be that wake up call to say, like I said, years ago, I was like scratching my head saying, I know, did he have two dads? I fell for it. I came up with all these things, and then suddenly the penny dropped. I was like, oh no. So that's just one example, but using things like that to make people realize that they do have an unconscious bias, and when they go, oh my God, you know. Um, and the bias is often, the bias is often not in that image that was shared, but the fact that somebody didn't recognize that it was biased. You might
yeah,
get, and again, generalizing, a guy goes, yeah, fine, ChatGPT give me a room of 12 men. As a woman, I'm going, hold on a minute. So yeah,
that's right.
I questioned, yes, he might have had two dads, so you're
You might
right.
have had two dads.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, so yeah, it's I forgot what I was going to say now. That's very
No,
sorry.
that's fine. It's good because we get so much chat. So, oh
Yeah,
no, that's a really good. And I think the fact that Karen, that you fell for it as well, tells us a
yeah,
lot, right? So, and you of course have been bold enough to say that you fell into the trap. But I mean, that's what we're up against. So,
yeah,
and that's scary. So, yeah.
yeah, and it's stereotypes
Of
again, isn't it? So yeah,
course. That's it, of course. And Steph's sort of saying, you often hear that when people refer to particular types of jobs, there's almost this feeling, well, that's a man's job or that's a woman's job, and I guess that's why we start to fall into those challenges, those gaps.
yeah. So they're
We're
the
getting quite
stereotypes
close
and the
to the end.
biases we have to break. Yeah, sorry. Yeah,
Oh, completely. No, that absolutely, you're spot on. I want to sort of ask you for a bit of advice as we get closer to the end here. So, if someone is stepping into this like leadership moment themselves, what mindset do you think that they need to carry with them to do it well?
I've already mentioned, I think, a growth mindset.
Yeah.
Like, how can I do better? And, we have a lot of people with fixed mindsets. The sort of leaders I was talking about before, I've done it this way, I've always done it this way. That's it. I don't need to learn anything else. I don't need to change anything else. We need women to have this growth mindset that there's always a better way. And being prepared to um, have the setbacks. I don't like to use the word failures, as many people know. It's a setback, and a setback's a good thing. It's a learning opportunity. Okay, I've learned from that. I can now not bounce back, bounce forward. So be prepared for that along the unlearning and relearning journey, and embrace it, and be prepared for that, and have the mindset that it'll take time. This isn't easy, but it can be done. We've Many of us have done it. Um, in our lifetimes. Um, so yeah, growth mindset, be prepared for setbacks, um, and don't question. Don't question your judgment. Stick with it. And yeah, there's a phrase I'm trying to find, and then just I can't find it. But it's like be you. Do you know what I mean? It's like be
Mm.
you. Stick to your values. And sometimes that's hard, especially if you're in a male-dominated environment and, you're getting pushed, put down or whatever. Stand your ground. And if the going gets really, really tough, get out. I get asked that question a lot of times. What should I do? And I get out. You know,
Hmm.
you will not change that environment. It's embedded. It's is it always going to be. Do yourself a favor, get out the stress, get out the anxiety, and just find, take your time, but just find something better because there is a better place. But that's the extreme, advice that I'd give because many women do stick with it. And many women say, oh, it's me. No, it's not. It's not you. It's them. But sometimes you need to get away from them.
Yeah, you're spot on. That's good advice. I think sometimes we are nervous about stepping away from something, feeling, that it's a failure. But you do quite often have to sort of quit while you're ahead, sort of thing. So,
Mm, mm.
um, there's some amazing commentary going on here as well. I mean, lots of people. Thank you to Helen and Brett as well. I've seen your comments come in. I'm just conscious that we're close to sort of the end of our time. So I'd love to carry on with this conversation in the Scopism community because I think it's a really, really important one. As Steph says, if there are any final questions, throw them in, and we'll pick those up just before the end. Um, but I think probably if I can just sort of summarize a little bit more about what you've shared with us, Karen, because I know that you have been deliberately provocative. So, and that's intentional. I think it's a really positive thing because it's driving us to think a little bit more. You're bringing us back to this idea that it's about leadership and not about gender. And I think that what really stands out for me from this conversation is that it isn't about women versus men. It's about something that's much more fundamental. It's about us really seeing that we're at a point, I'd say, the leadership that's been done in a certain way for decades, as you said, is no longer keeping up with the world that we're operating in. And
Yeah,
the gap that we're seeing isn't a lack of intelligence or experience or capability. It's actually reluctance to let things go. What used to work, let those things go. Because we know, you've shared with us many times before that unlearning something is uncomfortable. It challenges our identity, it challenges our status, it challenges certainty. Um, but it's quite clear from what you're saying that those leaders who are willing to do that and do that unlearning, who can combine the emotional intelligence with the technology intelligence, the AI aspect, that can lead with judgment and empathy and courage, they're all the leaders that really we need in our workforces to define the sort of what comes next. And so I think based on what you're telling us, the opportunity really is open to anyone. It's not just about women, but right now women are in a great position because they're leaning into some of those capabilities quite readily. So it's not about replacing people, it's about replacing those outdated models. And I think the question that you've posed for us really is an important one for us all to consider. What do we need really to do to unlearn and to lead with what comes next, because I think in the complex environments that we're working in, leadership isn't proven by how much control you have, or what your gender is. It's really proven by how much you can create trust. And that's a really, really
absolutely.
difficult thing to do. So, Karen, as we sort of come to the end here, is there any sort of final thoughts, words of wisdom you'd like to share?
Um, I think just to sum up, as you said, it's not about women make better leaders than men. Um, Everybody's got the capability. I just think that with the edge on emotional intelligence and the fact that, I said before, it's not about gender, it's about the experience and the socialization that women have had, can recognize the biases. We've been there, we've suffered from them, so we can see them, we can hold
Yeah.
AI to account. And I just think there's that opportunity now, there's a gap there, and I'd like to see women go and seize that while there's the opportunity, because generally I'm seeing the men aren't doing it. I'm not saying all of them, but the male leaders in the complex and the large organization in particular are not doing it.
Yeah. Thanks, Karen. That's fantastic. So the opportunity is there. I have to say we've had some amazing engagement today. So thank you to everybody who's part of the conversation. You have very much made it not a one-way dialogue, which is fantastic. Great conversation today, Karen. As always, thank you so much. Not just for sharing your thinking, but really challenging us a little as well. And I think there's a lot in what we shared today that will stay with people for quite some time, and we'll have some offline conversations about what's been discussed. So that brings us nicely to the end of the session. As I say, thank you to Karen, thank you to everybody that joins. If you're thinking about the next session, I just want to remind you here that session 3 is on Friday the 8th of May, 2 p.m. BST, with Witty Wits 2026 version, which is going to be hosted by the amazing Stacey Thomas. So please join us then, and thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Karen, for the conversation. I've really, really enjoyed it. Take care.